I wasn't quite sure what to play. I was going to play one of my tunes, and then I thought maybe I'll play one of Béla's tunes, but I figured I'll get Béla involved in one of my tunes. So a couple of days ago I said, Béla, give me an assignment. We would do this from time to time. And never the troublemaker. The banjo is usually tuned to an open G chord when you play bluegrass. So he said, okay, take the third string, tune it up a half step to G sharp. Take the fourth string, tune that up to D sharp. So this is what you end up with. And what did this end up being, Johnny, what was this?
Stella by Starlight.
Stella by Starlight. I didn't realize it. Just earlier today I came up with. And Johnny said that's Stella by Starlight. So it sounds pretty, normal. Thank you. That didn't have an ending, as of the moment I walked on stage, so. Béla is one of the most exceptional people I've ever met. I've known him since he was 16 years old when he came to me for lessons in the Bronx. Since then, we've become close friends. In fact, a while back, Béla told me that I was his best friend. I broke into a big smile. Then he paused for a moment and said, well, actually, one of my 3 best friends. As my smile started to fade, he reconsidered and said I was certainly in the top 5 of his best friends. I, of course, feel exactly the same way. In the early 70s, Béla had already taken lessons from Eric Darling of the Weavers and Mark Horowitz, a wonderful player and teacher out on Staten Island. And he could play some fiddle tunes and Scruggs numbers, but he wanted to get into some of the weird shenanigans that I was perpetrating on my first album. Béla began coming for lessons and would ask me to improvise over a straight-ahead bluegrass tune for 3 minutes, wherein I would do my best to bamboozle it within an inch of its life. He would return the next week having learned every note perfectly. It quickly became clear that this guy was from some other planet. Our lessons didn't last for long because there was no need, and after a while we would just get together to jam and trade banjo ideas. One tactic would be to play the traditional bluegrass tune, 9-Pound Hammer, in all keys without stopping. For those of you who care to try it, G sharp is less than hospitable in an open G tune banjo, but not impossible. Or we could give each other assignments to write songs in odd time signatures or weird tunings. After a while, Béla moved to Boston to play with Tasty Licks, as Johnny mentioned in the video. It was with them that he deepened his knowledge of Scruggs style, a discipline sorely lacking in the freewheeling lessons I was giving him. He also started studying jazz with saxophonist Billy Novick, and this marked a turning point. Béla would return to New York with tabs he'd worked out of scales and modes, major and minor, and all the keys. One of his goals was to play like jazz pianist Chick Corea. To quote Béla directly, "I could look up and down the neck of the banjo, and everything was there that you needed to play the notes, but no one had come up with a technique to play it. I started working on things most musicians work out on for most instruments, like working on scales, finding a way to play the chords. There was nothing remarkable about the things I did except that they were on the banjo." Well, actually what Béla did was remarkable, and clearly he was going places. His first album on Rounder Records featured a passel of wonderful originals and, impressively, an arrangement of Chick Corea's Spain. Who knew that in later years he'd be performing and recording with Chick? In the liner notes for Béla's second album, Natural Bridge, mandolin guru David Grisman correctly prophesied that Béla would be the first banjo player since Earl Scruggs to achieve mainstream attention. Even at this early stage, it was obvious where Béla was heading. Though he achieved a lot of success with Newgrass Revival in the 80s, a major label, country charts, it was with the Flecktones that Béla catapulted to new heights. A Warner Brothers deal, appearances on Johnny Carson and Conan, a clue in the New York Times crossword puzzle, and on and on. Now that's mainstream. There are more reasons than I can list to account for Béla's stellar success. For starters, he has a drive to excel. To that end, Béla has often said that he always tries to work with people who are better than he is so he can learn more. For another, he has a strong work ethic to bring his goals to fruition. Also, Béla pays attention to detail. He wants to be as good as he can be and will focus on the smallest minutiae to root out any weaknesses. One time we were hanging out, he was playing consecutive triplets on each of the open strings, zenning away that pesky pick noise that often bedoubles three-fingered players. Some folks would rub their picks against the side of their nose in hopes that the natural oils would cure the dreaded pick noise problem. I never saw Béla anywhere near his nose with a pick. His seems to be a more spiritual technique. Béla is also Béla is also very practical. In the later 70s or thereabouts, we would get together at airports, festivals, or wherever one of us was living and show each other our latest tunes. I would play one for him, and very gently he would suggest, there might be an easier left-hand fingering you could use for that particular passage. He, of course, was correct, and I've been skittish about that sort of thing ever since. He instinctively sees the clearest pathway. Béla is a visionary who has a knack for seeing the big picture. Take the Flecktones, for instance. He enlisted 3 other people who were virtuosic and thought outside the box and made sure none of the unusual instruments was a guitar, which tends to take up the same sonic space as the banjo. This would give him open range to roam freely in his improvisations. Béla would also come up with various audience-pleasing concepts, and does to this day, to make sure the proceedings were entertaining as well as musically mind-boggling. Béla is one of the most thoughtful people I know. He once told me that if he couldn't come back out at the end of the night after a concert, sit on the edge of the stage, and talk to every single person who came to say hello, the whole music thing wouldn't be worth doing. In his relationship with friends and audiences, he has a way of making people just feel good. He creates this ambiance that draws you in and gives you the sense that you're a part of something special. In preparing for his first ever Blue Ridge Banjo Camp in Brevard, North Carolina, which was held last month, he took the time to view a bazillion applicant videos, no other camp has ever done that, and grouped students into 5 categories. Thanks to his meticulousness, we instructors found that the members of each group were pretty much on the same level, making our jobs immensely easier, and most importantly, giving the students a comfortability they would otherwise not have had. He's always pushing himself and inspiring others in the process. Before the Saturday night concert in Brevard, Béla discovered that one of the students was a serious opera singer. On the spot, he invited her to sing on the evening show, then proceeded to sit down and banjoize her fairly difficult music. Their resulting duo was one of the highlights of the evening, along with all 100 students playing Cripple Creek in unison. Contrary to what one might think, the 2,300 people in the audience were enthralled by the latter. And as the video you've seen just recounts, Béla's been nominated in more Grammy categories than any other person in the history of the Grammys. This speaks to his inquisitive mind and impeccable technique and a deep musicality transmitted with heart. Béla's has been an amazing journey, and there's much more to come. As he has for many years, he continues to be a profound influence on five-string players and musicians in general, everywhere. Countless pickers have fallen helplessly in love with the banjo because they saw the Fleck tones, or heard his album with Marcus Roberts, or caught the dynamic duo he has with his wife Abigail Washburn, herself a very special banjoist and gifted singer. Béla has given the banjo street cred with legit jazz musicians, orchestras, and the world at large. And we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. Now it's with great honor that I induct my dear friend, Béla Fleck, into the American Banjo Museum Hall of Fame.
Now I'm supposed to say something? What a trip. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Tony. I have to say, there's two people that really are the reason I play banjo the way I do. And first was Earl Scruggs. And when I heard Earl Scruggs playing, I think I was about 5, I'm not really sure. And I grew up in New York City. I was in Queens visiting my grandparents, and the Beverly Hillbillies came on television. And I had this moment of, what is that sound? It just freaked me out. And it doesn't grab everybody, does it? Strangest thing. So my brother was sitting there. He's a year older than me. And after the theme music, I said, Louis, did you hear that? What? And he said, what? And I said, well, it's going to come back at the end of the show. Listen again. And it came back at the end of the show. And I said, and there was Earl Scruggs' banjo again. And I was like, there it is again. Did you hear that? And he said, yeah. And I said, what? I said, wasn't that the most incredible thing you've ever heard? And he said, I guess. It had no impact on him whatsoever. So I kind of feel like banjo people are born banjo people, and then they hear that sound, and then all of a sudden they know there's something, something out there. But anyway, so Earl Scruggs turned me on to this banjo thing, but I never had the nerve to think I could actually play a banjo. It seemed impossible that anybody could play the banjo. So fast and so silvery and so cool. And so I screwed around with the guitar for a while. And then my grandfather, when I was 15, my grandfather saw a banjo at a garage sale up in Peekskill, New York, and he got it for me. And the day before I started high school, there was this banjo. And so Earl Scruggs got me excited about the banjo, and my grandfather put this instrument in my hands, and then where I was sort of, interested in the guitar, I kind of liked it. It was something else when I got the banjo. It was like, the fire's getting turned on. All of a sudden, I was just a type A freak practicing banjo fool. And so after a couple of years, I had been listening to Earl Scruggs, I'd been listening to all this different stuff. And then the next person, I was just so lucky to find out about Tony Trischka. And my second teacher was a guy named Mark Horowitz. And Mark was really great. He could play so many different banjo players' music. He could explain to you how Don Reno did something. He could play an Alan Mundy thing. He could play Bobby Thompson. Bill Keith, all these different great three-finger players. And he could demonstrate them, show them to me. And one day he made the mistake of playing me one of Tony's records. And so I said, oh, I want that. That's what I want. That's what I want. So he went through this horrible 6 or 7 months where he would have to learn one of Tony's tunes to teach me every week for the lesson. And they're hard. They're really hard tunes to figure out. So one day he finally said, here's Tony's number. He lives in the Bronx. Stop bothering him. And so that's when I got to know Tony. And he became such a hero to me because of all the things he was doing with the banjo. Because long before guys like me came around, Tony was out there doing a lot of this brand new stuff with the banjo, and just being the person of his time. Early 70s and so forth. Just after the folk scare, or the folk boom, as they call it, and after the Beatles, and after Jimi Hendrix, and the world of music was changing so much in the 60s, and Tony captured a lot of this amazing energy and started playing the banjo in a way that nobody really thought they were allowed to yet at that point. And so anyway, I got to be so good at playing like Tony Trischka. He was my hero, and also a hero sort of in a personal way. He was a role model for me, just as the kind of person he is and was. So as you can see, I'm turning this into something about Tony, because I missed being here last year to see him being inducted. But at any rate, there was one day when Tony came to my house, I think it was after I got out of high school, and we were jamming at my folks' place, and somebody said to me afterwards, you know, that was so amazing. I was listening to you and Tony playing, and with my eyes closed, I couldn't tell which one was Tony Trischka. And that was sort of a wonderful thing. I thought, wow, that's awesome. And then I thought, well, wait a second. There already is a Tony Trischka. And so now I had this horrible problem on my hands, which was I wasn't allowed to sound like him if I was really gonna pursue this banjo thing. There already was a Tony Trischka. So the next number of years, it was trying to figure out what was left, and there wasn't really a lot, because if you go back and listen to these things that Tony was doing, he covered a lot of ground. He really covered a lot and still does. So anyway, I just wanted to say that between Tony and Earl Scruggs, those are the two people that made me so excited about the banjo and turned me into whatever the heck I am. So aside from that, thank you. I take the banjo very seriously, and it's wonderful to be with banjo people like me who've had that experience, whether it was Earl Scruggs or a great four-string player. And I think it's a great instrument. I think it demonstrates the good things about America, the way things can mix and make something new and special that couldn't happen anywhere else. And so I'm glad to be part of that journey for the banjo. All right, guys, thank you.